Hello friends and welcome back to Enterprise Architecture. Now, last episode we had started setting up our assembly lines for all of our ingredients that need 2 ingredients here in Satisfactory Plus. So in that episode I'd set up our reinforced iron plate factory, but I've also gone ahead and started to set up the other ones. I've got a rotor factory now set up. Next door to that, I put a stator factory. I've built out a brass pipe factory. And I've also got an encased industrial beam factory. So for the next couple of factories that we want to build out, we're going to be needing bronze. We don't have that in our construction line currently. We need to build bronze frames, and we also just need bronze ingots to build conveyor belts as well. We don't have any of that set up, and we don't have a bronze factory anymore. I tore down the temporary one that was very, very tiny. Now, this means we need to make bronze, and if you've played Satisfactory Plus or seen the previous episodes, you'll know that bronze requires multiple ingredients. We need copper and we need tin to be able to build anything out of bronze. Now, I do think I'm going to set up a molten bronze setup, very similar to the steel and iron factories that I put in the video about 2 episodes ago. So we're going to need to set this up. Now, that also means we need to have increased Rubyte and Saphirite production because I don't really have enough to split those right now. So we're gonna have to add a couple of more nodes to this, which means setting up a few more of our miners, which I believe there's at least some Rubyite down here, and I think there's some Saphirite over here as well that we can add in. So we need to set all of that up. Now, one quick housekeeping note I did want to mention. A couple of you have complained about the frame rate that I'm getting when I'm playing Satisfactory Plus. Yes, Satisfactory Plus seems to take an unusually high toll on my machine, even with a 3060 card. So unfortunately, what I've had to do is a couple of things. I've lowered the quality of the textures and the lighting. I've used a lower resolution for recording this video, but on YouTube you shouldn't notice a big difference to that. But hopefully that means that we'll see less lagging and drops than we were seeing before. Now, I also know that with update 8 coming down the pipe, that means we should get some improvements possibly as well, particularly since I use a lot of signs typically for lighting, and that is one of the known sources of lag in the current version. So hopefully that will get reconfigured and fixed up a little bit. But with any luck, this video and the ones after this should look a little better maybe and have a higher frame rate than some of the ones you've seen me put out so far. So with no further ado, let's dive in. Now, I did note that there's a bunch more Saphirite nodes over in this area near where we've laid out these factories. I have 4 nodes here. There's 2 more nodes over there. So we do want to connect these up and run them down to our iron factory. You can see the red building there peeking out between those 2. But the main thing that we're concerned with right now is the Rubyite that's over here. And this is going to be the Saphirite node all the way down here that we're going to use for that. Now, there's also a decent amount of Rubyite down here on the southern side of our map. So all of that is waiting to be used and we haven't touched it. So we're going to get all of those nodes as well. So the thing we're going to have to do though is run it all the way back to our crushing factories, which are the 3 buildings over here in front of our assembly factories there. So that's going to require a little bit of work to get it all the way from over here to over there. This might be the time to start building some sort of a bus that's going to take it all the way across the map. So maybe that's what we'll do here, because we're also going to have to then bring it back all the way to these middle areas for processing. This is where we're doing all of our molten work, is in the middle here. Now, we're kind of running out of room east-west to build more of these, but we still have a lot of north-south room, and we have a lot of vertical room. So far I've built these to be all 1 level factories. I think it's time to start going up. That means I am gonna have to use a couple of pumps to get my water to the higher floors, but I think it'll be worth it overall just to keep this in a nice condensed space. We can use the same basic space that we have here for all of that production. Now, one thing I've been toying with as an idea, and I haven't really committed to yet, is right now I'm bringing in all of the ingredients as crushed ingredients and doing a several stage process here of melting them separately and then mixing them together. What I might want to do is start doing the melting at the same place that I am doing the crushing, or at least in another similar location nearby, because I'm going to be using copper for multiple things. I'm going to be using all of these ingredients in different ways. Iron is getting used for multiple things in these molten ingredient combinations, both for iron production itself and also for steel production, etc. So I might want to rethink how I'm doing this, but for at least today, I'm just going to go the same way I have been doing this and building this out. I'm just going to keep going vertical and exactly copy what has been done. Okay, so this should give a general idea of the lay of the land here, of what nodes are remaining we haven't tapped. In short, a whole lot of Rubyite, just a ridiculous amount. Again, that makes sense because originally it was limestone in the game. But not a lot of Saphirite. I've only got one node down here left, that 60 node. There are 3 up here. If we go over towards this weird crater area, that might be something to look at. But that's a long way, although we do have the infrastructure built here because this is where we are getting our crystals right now from, our quartz. So that might be something to tap into, but I'm going to start with just this 60 here. Now, while exploring, I did find a couple other things that I marked here as points of interest. We found some biowater nodes, which if we get back into biowater for biofuel, we might use, and at least one sulfur node. I haven't finished mapping out all the area around here where there's the coal lake. There's a lot of those coal nodes up here that we're going to probably use for steel, as well as the Saphirite here that we'll use for steel as well. These nodes, maybe we'll tap into those for steel. There's just a lot of coal in this vicinity. And we don't need to use that coal for power, at least as long as the mod authors haven't nerfed our solar panel. Right now, we've got a lot of solar production, more than we need, but they said at some point they might reduce the amount of solar you can build. So for at least now, we're okay, but in the longer term, that could be a problem. Okay, so first things first, let's get our Saphirite hooked up to our existing line. So that's easy enough. We're just going to put down another one of our modular miners here, drop a middle mining head in it, and wire that up. Now we do have a 60 line already all the way over here of Saphirite, and you can see it's actually getting kind of backed up. Now, this is a 60 line, so if we upgrade this to 120, we should be able to pull all of that together into this same line. So I'm going to run this new line all the way back over that way, and then upgrade it all the way back down. Okay, so now that we've done our external upgrades, we need to make our internal upgrades here. So we do have our 2 lines coming in already. We'd already split those out. Now we just need to turn online this next extra crusher that we had not hooked up previously. And that is going to crush Saphirite. There we go, just like the others. And we just need to run in these various lines here. So we're going to try and lay this out the same way that we did in the previous round. I'm trying to get these to line up just perfectly. Like that. And then we just need to make sure, let's see, what's this getting out? Should just be 2 ingredients, right? Yeah, crushed down. Okay. So for that, we can just use a Mark 1 lift. Like that. And a Mark 1 belt coming out. Like that. Yeah, and then we just need Mark 2 belts going across everywhere. Like that. And it doesn't have power, easy enough. Okay, so if I did that properly, yeah, there we go. We should start getting more of our Saphirite out. Okay, on to the next floor. Here, we should have the same thing. Mark 2 belts all the way around. It's going into 2 of these so far. Now, let's see. These each take 120 per minute, so no other upgrades should be needed on this side of things. And I think what we're going to want to do is just combine the 2 copper lines that we had here. If I can remember how to do that. So this should be... Ah, yeah, they're being merged in there. So this is actually 220 belts, and that's why it's backing up. So let's go ahead and upgrade this to a Mark 3. And then we're going to put a Mark 3 line out. And then a Mark 3 line down. And we're just going to keep carrying this forward with all of these Mark 3 upgrades. So with all of those upgrades done, we're now getting effectively twice as much copper to our brass factory. But like I said, we need bronze, not brass. So we still need to bring over our tin from the Rubyte into a facility that I assume we're going to put in this same space. Maybe I'll just build another one on top here, like copy this exact same layout and build the second factory on top of it. Because it's effectively most of the same ingredients, it's effectively most of the same outputs, and we do have enough space that we can run that around our existing lines. So that might be the easiest way to get that up and running. After I looked at it, I think our Rubyte factory has more than enough room. We aren't even using any of the space basically that we've already got set up for it. So I'm gonna trace out how much more of this we need to build to expand, because we're just using one crusher right now out of the whole thing. So let me do some math real quick and figure out how much work it's going to be to use this space. We've already got the building built, and that does centralize everything. Okay, so right now we are only bringing in 60 Rubyte to the factory where I'm at right now. So if we wanted to expand this, it wouldn't be that hard to lay down a few more lines and bring in the rest of this. Here we've got another 60. Between these two nodes, that's another 60, so that's 120. Here, another 60. So 180 to bring in, 2 more nodes here. So at that point, we're gonna max out a Mark III belt. And then also all the way over here, there is still one more 60. So I think I put these 4 on a Mark III belt and bring it in. And I think I bring these 2 in on a Mark II belt, and that'll be 120 line. And then maybe we even add in this 60 line here. I don't know if we actually need to add in any of these that are to the north side, but that one's close enough that we could do it without too much work, and we have most of the infrastructure in place. This one might require a little bit more finagling because it's in the forest. But let's start with these and see how far we get. Okay, so the first set of 3 is in the weird crater that's over here, over next to this coal node. So we're going to go ahead and set up these 3, as I mentioned, on that single Mark III belt. Okay, once again, exactly the same setup as before. We drop our modular miner nodes down. And one over here. We make sure that those get mining heads. And we make sure that those have power. Great. Now, I think what we'll do is start setting up some sort of infrastructure here to run things out and up to the coal line there. And now we've run this all the way down here, right to the next Rubyte node, which we can just connect up the same way we've done with our Saphirite. So, once again, another miner down. Another mining head in it. We connect up a power pole from it. And we connect this up to the line. We can just connect it up right up to this one right next to it. How about that? Great. And now what we have to do is connect the dots here. So I'm actually going to do the same thing that I'd done before here. I think I'm going to see if I can't get this to perfectly line up like so. And there, now we have a nice little stacking going on, and that should all connect up. Okay, so we have our new 240 line of Rubyte coming in. That's going into our machines here to be crushed, and then those are being taken upstairs here to our sorters to be sorted. That means we're getting just under 270 crushed tin per minute. Actually, it's getting to be about 235 because we only have 60 going into this one. So it's about half the production rate of all of the others, but that does mean that we are getting a lot of tin that we can use. Our Saphirite, similarly, we only got one additional node here, but that is going into the Saphirite building all the way over here, so that we're getting a little bit more crushed copper coming out. Now, all of those are being then routed to our main building over here. this is where we were putting the brass production previously. Now, the bronze production we're going to do upstairs, and we're going to do this a little bit differently. So what I want to do here is melt down the copper and the tin in this space as we did in the floor below, nothing different there. But what is going to be different is I'm going to route part of that into this adjacent building here so that we can cool it and turn it into ingots. That's going to increase our overall ingot production, and we're then going to route this all the way back to our tin and copper production buildings all the way over there, meaning that we can then turn off all of the production on the bottom floor that's doing the smelting. Instead, all of the smelting will be liquid. Now, at some point, I want to do exactly the same here with our zinc that we've got, but that's for another time. We don't really have much demand for zinc. We're not really using it for anything, so we're not going to worry about that, which is happening in that building today. Okay, so to set up this next tier of factory here above the existing one, there's a couple of ways I could go about this. One way would be to manually rebuild all of the stuff that I have already built here, but I've already built it once. I don't really have a lot of enthusiasm for building exactly the same facility a second time. It just takes forever, and I don't enjoy that part, so I'm not gonna. Instead, we're gonna use area actions. So I'm gonna place down 4 corners with area actions, one on each side of this building. And that's going to frame in the area that we are going to use to copy and paste the building into place where we want it. So let's put this down here, and then we're going to put the last one down right here. Okay, great. Now, the other thing that you need to do is set the bottom of this space. So we right click and we go to Set Clear Bottom. We're going to put that right here. Right here. There we go. And that means this entire building is now going to be captured for copy and paste. Now, it's not going to set up everything. I want to be clear about that. It is going to definitely not set up our pipes and whatnot, all the connective stuff, unfortunately. But it will do everything else. So I don't know how to make it do all of those things, the extra bits, but for whatever reason, it doesn't want to. So we just tell it that we want to build the same building 16 meters above. And you'll see here, it's going to show it exactly the same, just higher up. Okay, so first things first, we hit OK to, well, we want to preview this, right? So preview. We hit OK to copy. And then we go back and we say paste to location. And it's not going to come out of my inventory. Nothing's going to happen. It's just going to magically appear. Now let's go ahead and clear our selection. So you can see here, this is the same building that has been set up. All of my fixtures are there, but none of my belts or tubes or cables are in place, which is kind of a bummer, but we're going to make do with it. It's not going to be that hard for us to connect all this up. First things first, we want to go through and clear out all of the bottom holes that we had left in place. Nothing is going to be exported out from the bottom of this floor because there's a floor below it, so we're probably going to have to go back out the side here for most things, kind of the way that we've got it coming in from the side. And we will need to clean up some of this stuff, like these door holes and things like that, that aren't quite how we want them, so all that needs to happen. But overall, this should work for our purposes. We can set all this up and reset all the recipes and basically do the same production that we're doing below. Should be pretty straightforward and easy now that all the buildings are already in place. So I'm not going to go through every single element of how this design is laid out, because it's exactly the same design as we did in our brass factory and in our iron factory and in our steel factory, so you can watch any of the previous videos to see how this is generally put together. But it's pretty straightforward. So I'm going to go ahead and boot this together and see you all back in a second. So the next thing we'll need to do is set up a factory for all of our bronze ingredients. So all of those lovely ingots are coming into this factory space here that we will then build out. First couple of ingredients we're going to make are bronze plates and bronze beams, because those just take bronze ingots to create. After that, we can turn the plates into bronze pipes and the beams into our bronze frames over back in our main factory where we're doing the dual ingredient setup, all the way on the other side. And with that, we have all 3 of our basic bronze ingredients completed. Now all we have to do is run these 2 completed elements, the plates and the beams, all the way back to our manufacturing facility over there, all of those orange buildings. Now, to route our items out of these storage containers up top here, we're going to go out through the bottom. And the easiest way to do this snugly is to put lifts right into the sides of those splitters, just through that edge, which generally means you kind of have to snuggle them in, kind of like this. And then they kind of clip right into that side there. See, we can do that again here with the second one. We're going to line this up here. That looks about right. And then if we've done our job properly, there, yeah, it should just snuggle into the side. That looks pretty sharp. I can live with all of that. Okay, so now all we have to do is finish routing these all the way from here back down our row. Now at some point we do need to have a reckoning about our belt layout. This has become a mess on the underside here because the logistics are just kind of all over the place. Ideally this would be much more efficient and not so messy, but until we have like a couple of days free that we can just redo all of our belt logistics, we're just going to keep up with the mess. I would love to have just one row here that's going in and one row here that's going out, and everything gets mapped back and forth to that, but we did not plan that well. So for now, we need to hold off on that until we can do some belt management. Okay, so there we go. Bronze plates and bronze beams all coming into our mega factory setup over there. Now before we can call this project done, I really wanted to go back and decorate our big box factories over here that we've got with something that looks a little bit more like our iron factory. I think that the iron factory design turned out really well, and so I want to copy this. And I think the way that we're going to do this is to create a blueprint from this factory design here into our big blueprint designer. Now, thankfully, there's an advanced blueprint Mark III that we can use that will fit one unit of that front facade easily into the space. Okay, so there we have our finished redone factory built from scratch. That took about an hour for me to get all the moving bits and pieces here, mainly because of all of these angled bits that just require certain nudging to get into place. But all said and done, it looks pretty good. So that I can reuse this more easily, I also am going to want to build this in a tiled fashion. So the next thing we're going to do is take this and repeat just the middle pieces of it in between these as edges. So to do that, we just pull the sides off here and leave the main structure intact in the middle. So we just grab all these up and, oh, not the blueprint designer itself, everything inside the blueprint designer. Start pulling these away. There, just like that. And then we can save this back in our designer. And we've already called it Facade 1, so let's just call it Facade 1A, and we will save that blueprint. And now when we build that, we can put it in between the others, just like so. That should be pretty easy to do. Okay, wonderful. Okay, so while trying to decorate my brand new factory here, I've learned something really important. And that is that overall, blueprints kind of suck. They are really tough to move around. But we do have one really big advantage going for us here when it comes to those blueprints. And that's this. If we take our blueprint, say, for this piece of the facade that we want to plonk down, it's not going to let us position it exactly where we want. It just doesn't want us to put things over top of other things. See, it gets all weird when I start trying to position inside, overlapping any of this space, right? That's just not going to work, and it's not good. But what we can do instead here is kind of sort of put it in the ballpark of where we want, right? So let's just put it here. Now, here's the beauty of micromanage once again. If you haven't already heard me talk about this mod, I love this mod. Now, when we copy and paste with micromanage, it creates ghosts, and ghosts are not good because ghosts can't be really selected. You can't copy and paste from them. It's a whole thing. But micromanage is smart enough to know that this blueprint is a whole unit. So if I control shift click on a piece of it, it selects the whole thing. Isn't that neat? Isn't that interesting? So, rather than trying to move around the blueprints when you're placing them, now you can move around the blueprints after you've placed them. And that's a lot easier to do. So we can shift this over, like so, put it about where we want. That's about where we want it. So we don't even have to move around the whole piece if we don't want. We can just pick parts of this off. But if you have large structures that you do want to move around, that control shift click is going to be the quickest way to get the whole blueprint and start moving it into the place that you want. That's what I did on this whole stretch, and it worked really, really well. So yeah, blueprints with micromanage gets you perfect positioning every single time. Now I'm also realizing that the units, these big units of facades that I had built, are kind of too big to mess with. I think I actually need smaller chunks of this that I can slowly put together in some of these spots where I want to do more repetition vertically as well, such as what we're doing right here. So I'm going to break those down a little bit more and turn them into chunks that I can reuse a little easier. So here's a great example. I went ahead and made this facade front as a single blueprint. I can select it as a single blueprint, and then I can just kind of nudge it over into place where I want it, which is right here, and then over to line up with that edge. So just like that, it's perfectly aligned. We do have to go through and reset up our billboard, so we just tap it real quick. But there, now we have a perfectly aligned facade. That's real nice. That works really, really good. So we're going to keep using that trick to move around our pieces of our blueprints and get these all into place until this building is done and looking good. Now on top of this factory, I want to do a little sort of like vent looking design of some sort. And I have a neat trick to do that. If you'd watched my video on the best mods of 2023, you might have already seen this trick. But I like to take catwalk stairs and flip them around a bit, and that lets me do more interesting things with them. So I want to select this one, so it's the bottom one, and using micromanage, then I should be able to flip this over. So just like that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring it up so it's just halfway above that foundation top, just a little bit. And then the last thing we want to do here is use shift to rotate it. And that's still a little higher than I wanted. So actually, let's just bring that down one more. And if I sink it down in like that, it gives me a nice little great looking effect. I also like to put these over top of windows sometimes. That can also be fun. So if I just run these out like this, there we go. We have a nice little vent looking display, and that works pretty cool. Maybe I'll just remove that one. There we go. There. Now they look like nice little vents on top. Pretty cool. Okay, so there is our finished factory. So we still have our excess tin and copper coming out that we need to put into this building for processing. We'll do that later. But for now, I think this double-decker building looks pretty good, especially sitting next to all of our other factories, which also have the same similar setup and style. Now, one thing I did go back to do is update our steel factory to match as well. And I really love the look of the air collectors. I thought those were super, super neat. So I stuck those on top, even though only one of these is actually in use. The one right in front of me you can see is moving a little bit, taking in air. The others are kind of just for show and decoration, which you can tell because the indicator light on top is red, not green. But I thought that that was a really neat look putting it on top. Now, for things like our CO2 chimney, I'm leaving that on the side for two reasons. One, I think it gives it a little bit of visual texture, which I think is neat. Two, if you're pumping things in, like the air collectors are doing, it's basically treating gases as fluids. So they flow down naturally, not up in pipes. Now, when we're getting rid of fluids, in this case CO2, it's got to go through this twisty pipe, which means if we put it on the roof, we actually would have to add a liquid pump to get it back up, which I don't really want to do. I think that would be silly. So we're just sticking it out to the side, and I think this little platform kind of keeps that same industrial feel. I did reroute it so it was on the metal pillar piece rather than on the red spot here. So it did scooch over a little bit, but I just rerouted the pipes and it works great. I did not copy what I did on the iron factory with these round tubes yet. I don't know how I feel about those or if I want to continue doing that. I do like the contrast with the round and the square, and I do like these glass domes still. I just haven't put them in yet. Now, I did make a couple of little tweaks to the designs here. I started using the 4-meter ramp walls instead of the 8-meter at the top of this wall section. I'm still using the 8-meter ones on the bottom. I just think that gives it a nice little visual detail, just adds a little something, and I like that texture to it. I've noticed also that center door walls, I was unable to paint. It doesn't want to paint center door walls. So I'm using side door walls in most places, except for here on these factories where I have the exposed sides, because I found that although these rows with the crossings are perfectly centered on my primary factory side, for this on our production side, it's off-centered slightly because the buildings are slightly different sizes. So to that, I'm using a Structural Solutions 4x8 auto door, which of course are paintable, and they look really, really neat. I have no clipping mode turned on, so if I turn off no clipping, you'll see it opens very, very nicely and gives me a good entrance into the facility. Now, everything inside is still the same blue of the default Fix-It foundation and wall color that comes with this pack, so I'm just leaving that for now. But I do think the red outside looks really neat. So I have those auto doors everywhere, and they kind of blend in at a distance very, very nicely while still giving access to the facility. But I do like this double-decker look, and I do like using these inverted stairs on top to give us just that extra little bit of texture on the big building to break it up. So I think we have a nice little row coming together. So as I mentioned before, we are using the same color scheme as the old LEGO M-Tron line from Space. I thought that those looked really neat when I was a kid, and I thought that they would work really, really well here. So again, we have those red panels, the gray concrete and gray metal pillars, the gray frames, along with all of the lights are these glowing neon green. I just think that looks really, really sharp. So we've got our bronze factory set up, we have our bronze secondary ingredients being created. I think that's a pretty good stopping point. Thanks again for watching this episode of Enterprise Architecture, and we'll see you back here next time. Bye, friends!